What's shaking? Hey, I'm Rick Jordan. Today, we're going all in. All right, today I've got a really cool question to ask somebody. And my guest today is going to tell us how to do some amazing things with leadership. Now, I'm a big fan of leadership. I've even thought about putting a course together on leadership just because of some unique styles that I have. I don't know if they're unique, but I've often said to my team in my companies that I lead like a baseball coach. I played baseball for 9 years, right? I actually go out and I'll high five people. I'll put an MVP out there and I'll say, great job. That was an awesome hit. Good catch, all of that. And then I'll also be the same guy that'll say, sit your ass on the bench. Think about it for 2 innings. But you know what? You've got another at bat coming up. So you got to get right back on there. Get your head straight. I'll teach you what to do. I'll show you where your issues were and we'll work through this so you can get back up there, back up to the plate and hit another solid home run or single, double, triple, whatever. That's kind of how I've led a lot of the years, a lot of high fives and a lot of direct coaching. Now, today, my question as I welcome, I think it's Dan Tocchini. I didn't even ask you how to pronounce your name, buddy. Is it Tocchini? Tocchini. I got you.
Anybody speaks English will say Tocchini.
That's awesome. Welcome to the show, Dan. It's good to have you, my brother. Really good to have you. And this is cool because you're a leadership expert, right? And I have a question to ask you right away. And maybe this has been asked before of you, but what does it mean to turn leadership into leadership?
Oh, so you've been looking at our website, have you?
You know what? I've got a great team, man. Just like the Tonight Show, just like Jimmy Fallon that finds this stuff for me.
It takes more than you think it does, always. It takes more than you think it does. And you better be ready to put something at stake. Otherwise, you'll just remain leadership.
Oh, that's intriguing. So put something at stake. That's interesting to me because I was about to ask, where did you come up with leadership? Or is that for the people that don't have the skin in the game, right?
Right on. I want to play the game, but I don't want to risk losing anything, looking bad, making a mistake, being embarrassed, faltering. And so I think leadership is then some kind of magic formula, or I'm constantly on top, or I'm always the right one. That's not the way it works.
Yeah, no, brother, there's got to be a scenario, right, to where you look back at your own self, because a lot of the things that we develop, like I like the word leadership. I've never seen that before, right? I'm sure you've looked back at your own leadership or your leader shit and came up with that word. Right
on. It is a confession. I see it out there, but it's, if you spot it, you got it. You know how that goes.
Yeah, for sure. Give me an example of that. Like, when did you actually look back and be like, oh man, that's just some shitty leadership?
Well, I had a company I ran for 20 years.
What kind of company?
It was a consulting. It was more of a training, coaching company. I started training work back in the 80s, early 80s, 82. And we started a company called the Coaching Company back then. It didn't work out because nobody knew what coaching was. But we did a lot of work inside organizations. We called it consulting, and that turned into advisory, right? Those old school words, Yeah. But I was running a company for a long time and had multiple, employees, 14 years. Many of the leadership, most of them, I'd say 99% of them were there for 14 or so years. And it got to a place where I could tell we weren't performing at the highest level we could, not even close. And we had for some time, but we faded. And rather than address it, I tried to become something I wasn't. Tried to be this compassionate. To me, I was trying to live up as the imposter syndrome. I was trying to live up to something I wasn't.
Yeah.
And I was trying to find ways to talk about very difficult issues without addressing them directly, or if people got upset, I backed off.
Like what kinds of issues?
Performance issues.
That's a big one, right? I mean, I've talked about this in my own organizations from time to time too, to where I call it like the yin without the yang, where, everybody talks about all the amazing incentives, and the commissions and the bonuses and all the amazing positive things that you can have from doing your job the right way and going above and beyond. But then never ever really talk about when it comes time anyways to talk about the performance issues. Everybody like leaders just tend to run away because it's great to talk about all the good stuff they're doing, right? But then when they screw up, which happens, we're all human, right? All human, things happen, but even more so, it's not even so much that we're human. We all have the need to grow. And you need good leaders in order to point out that yang to the yin to be like, hey, you screwed up there too. Right.
Yeah.
So you're saying that that's uncomfortable for a lot of people.
They didn't want to do the exploration. I didn't want to risk what, they thought of me. We became good friends over the years.
Yeah.
I was, just full of shit, and by not really being authentic with them at the time and saying what I was seeing, because I could see things, I tried to work around it, and the withholding of what I saw was a lie. It was just, so, there's all kinds of shit. If, there's bullshit and there's bullshit is you're lying, and the unwillingness to talk about what needed to be talked about, or at least talk about it in a very, in a way that brought it to the surface where we all could look at it.
Yeah.
I was more about saving myself from the pain of doing that, or the potentiality of losing people that were doing things I didn't want to do again. And so in a way, I was trying to be about them, but really it was about me. I didn't want that back on my lap. I didn't want to face that. If that was the price I was going to have to pay.
For sure. You turned it into a you problem, right? And that's an ego thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I'm hearing you. And it's interesting because there's a lot of people that say, oh, I'm not good with conflict, right? And you'll see leaders that say, I don't like conflict. And it's like, well, conflict does not mean combat. I think
right.
That's,
it doesn't.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that fallacy that exists. It's like conflict is actually it's a tool, man. It's a resource to be able to actually get to a point.
It is the yellow brick road to success. I mean, there's only three kinds of problems. You got a normal problem, you got an abnormal problem, and you got a pathological problem. And I think one of the biggest things I know as a leader I struggled with for a long time was, which problem do I need to solve first? Because anything you do that's new is going to bring a new set of problems.
Yeah.
Which ones? You always have problems. Which ones are the most important ones to deal with? And you really got to think of that in context. So there's a normal problem, like if you and I are running a business and the economy shifts and we have to deal with people leaving, or we have to make cuts, etc. And that's a normal problem. But let's say we have turnover over and over and over again over the year, over the years. That's an abnormal problem and probably pathological. So I need to pay attention to that.
That's intriguing, man. Yeah.
We have a cash flow problem, right?
Yeah.
In the first couple of years, that might be so. But after 7 or 8 years in business, if I'm continually having a cash flow problem, then I've got something pathological I need to look at, and I need to go at it.
Yeah.
Really put it in the front and center with everybody.
I don't see you ever having a problem with conflict, though, because as I'm hearing you, it's almost like you might be part of your own mafia or something. I mean, you've got the great last name, and you're sitting here, you're talking to me like this, and it's like, you've got this pathological problem, and I'm like, I'm just waiting for your hand to go up. I'm messing with you, right? But it's
we're not going to make no pictures without Michael.
Yeah, right. But even with that, it's like, I can see the way that you carry yourself, and you're all smiles here, but I can imagine you in a workplace setting, in a leadership setting, to where you start to, now listen, we got to have a talk.
I try to stay calm, but I have from time to time got upset, but I welcome it back, by the way. One of the things I do, at least with our team, and we do it with the teams that we work with, is we work with what it means to be able to argue well, right?
Yeah,
I mean, if we're going to argue, it should improve both of our sense of what's wanted and needed. Our sense of logic needs to be sharpened if we're having a good argument. And usually if we're arguing because we care about something. We just see it. We just see it differently. So many times I've had guys, or gals come in and, hey man, we got to talk about this and get into a good argument. And as a result, we get smarter.
I want to explore that a little bit, because I wish I had my team here. I'm pulling up my phone because the meaning of words carries a lot of value for me. It always has. I'm a nut. I'm a nerd. My team gets crazy because as soon as you use a term, I want to go, what do you mean by the term? Yeah, exactly. So that we're on the same page. Right? Yep, right on. So, I mean, as you're talking about this, because I think of an argument, or the word, a lot of people will throw that around, almost like conflict and combat, right? They think, at least mentally, it's a psychological thing, or pathological, as you said, where it's interchangeable, where people will think that a conflict, whether it's workplace or even in a relationship, it means combat. So argument, I'm curious, right? And as I'm looking at this, it's like a reason or set of reasons given with the aim of persuading others that an action or idea is right or wrong. Like there is a strong argument for submitting a formal appeal. I mean, it's almost going like off of what a lawyer would look at. So when you have a lawyer presenting a case in front of a judge, and this is why words have, the meaning of words have so much value to me, because it's like when you talk like partners, right? Husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, boyfriend, and then you dive into, oh, we had an argument, a horrible argument, or I want to even better, Dan. It's like when people say, I don't want to argue, but really they're saying, I don't want to fight. And that's the conflict versus combat thing again, because they're relating argument to fighting when really it's like an argument, like a lawyer walks into a room. Is he fighting with the judge? Is she fighting with the jury? No, they're presenting a case, which is called an argument. It's like literally saying, this is what I feel. This is how I think. This is my view, and it's a discussion. But that's why the value or the meaning of words has so much value to me, because it's like so many people think argument equals fight, just like conflict equals combat. This is getting really good, man. I mean, I'm glad you brought this up.
You hit it on the head. I mean, when I talk with the executives I work with, I talk about argument as the art and science of effective reasoning, and that we're actually going to be, it's a cooperative activity. Yeah. And I'm going to get passionate for what I see or what my perspective is. And I want you to be however you need to be to get your point across. And I let them know, look, I'm going to argue, I'm going to state my claims as if I'm right, but I want you to know I'm listening as if I could be wrong. Yeah. And I need you to address what you hear incongruent so that we can sharpen and make the best decision out of it.
Dude, I think we're going to chop that down into a clip and a reel, because that was incredible what you just said. Right? You're going to state your opinions as if I'm right, but my ears are going to be open, listening in case I'm wrong. As if I'm wrong.
I've been married almost 50 years, and it's been tested.
Dude, okay, how many years into it did you finally figure that out? That's what I want to ask.
Oh, about 35.
About 35, yeah. That's good. At least it wasn't 49, right?
Needless to say, the last 15 or so years of my life have been the best and most peaceful and enjoyable.
Right on.
With my beautiful
You've been
wife.
married 50 years? I mean,
almost.
Just want to draw attention to that real quick. So when did you get married? I mean, I can obviously figure it, but 19, 20, 21?
I'm 60. I'll be 69 in December.
Wow.
And I married my wife when I was 26 and she was 23, I think, 21.
Okay, so you're like at 40 something years. Yeah, so you're rounding up to, that's still incredible, man. I mean, it's
40. Yeah, I was 23. I was married at 23.
Okay, so you're like 21. Yeah, so you're like almost 45, 47 years into it.
47 years.
Yeah. Wow, man, that's incredible. First, that's awesome. Good job sticking through it and pushing through it. I mean, I'm sure there have been, like, if you look back, right, there's been ups and there's been downs, and it's almost kind of.
I've written books about it.
That's great, yeah. But it's when people can see roller coasters too, and it's be like, oh, we've had the highs and the lows. It's like I don't think that's the case. When you look at you and you reflecting back, people in relationships, sure, they can look over a short period of time, maybe a year, and see the highs and the lows of a relationship. But when you look at a span of 50 years, like you're saying, I would think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but could you not call those more of a season or seasons rather than highs and lows?
Oh yeah. I mean, I met her when she was 16 and I was 19.
Wow.
So I could have been arrested. I just created agreement with her mom, thank God. And it was an old point.
Did it involve a little bit of a payoff?
Yeah. And they were both from the old country, but so I knew her very young, and we split up before we got married and went through a lot. And then we got married and went through a lot. It was quite a dance. But I think, like any relationship, it requires a willingness to be committed to something bigger than your own self, which I really didn't get a hold of till about 10 years into the relationship.
Wow!
And I started to get a hold of it then.
That's amazing, man. I appreciate you. I really do, because I think you have a lot to teach people. It's because quite literally you're 69 years old. I did an episode, just me, a solo episode a little while back, talking about my grandmother and how she passed when she was 93, and it's like, I'm 44, and I love having conversations with those who are, like 20 years and more to my elder.
Yeah.
And I say that
my
to
my dad's 90. He'll be 91 this year.
Oh, dude, that's amazing. That makes me so happy for you, for real, because you still have that's like blood relative that you're able to look up to and talk to that way.
I mean, he's here just present like anybody. I mean, he's on it. He runs his business. He goes down to the office, usually sleeps for a long time, but makes deals and then goes home every day. He loves it.
That's great too. Cause I mean, when you look at that and I hear people like, oh, I'm going to retire at this age, or like this big thing for a lot of people who are 25 and 30. I hope you're listening right now, which is most of our audience, right? Perk up your ears for this is that I don't feel like there's ever an age in life when you should be retiring, or actually you should be going towards retirement and be like, I'm going to make so much money that I'm going to retire, cause just like Dan and I are talking here, there's seasons in your life. Yeah, and you can go through seasons of education, making a lot of money, and then going back and recycling and learning more and making more money, and then buying more amazing crap, right? And then learning, going through a season of learning leadership and excluding leadership, and then you go through another season, and then you get to a point to where it's like mentorship, like Dan is right here, to where you can look back and be like, this is my place in life right now. I write books, I talk to people, I tell them what I know from what I've experienced over the last 50 years of my life.
And I love the work too. I love to get in it with the teams. I do a lot of work with startups, and my specialty is establishing culture through leadership in the organization. So I do a lot of work with boards and leadership teams, and those communications between, the governance and the execution and operationalization of strategies.
That's a big word. I wouldn't attempt it.
I couldn't. Listen, it's a miracle it came out.
Yeah. That's awesome. Dude, I appreciate you. I mean, I've had so many questions on here. There's one more that I want to hit before we close out today, because it was intriguing to me, right? Obviously we hit the leadership versus the leadership, but paradoxical leadership.
Yeah.
Right. What do you mean by that? Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because you talk about this a lot, right?
Earlier we were talking about, the kind of how I blew that company up.
Yeah.
Really, and I was struggling in a paradox. A paradox is a tension that exists that we navigate. You don't resolve a paradox. You don't, there's no answer to it. You have to learn to negotiate it. And the paradox you and I were talking about in that moment when I was telling that story is the paradox between empathy, which is creating affinity with people, which you need, they get that you care about them and what they're up to. And enforcing is the other aspect of it, right? Enforcing what's needed and necessary and what holds the game in place, right?
Yeah.
That's everything from contracts to deliverables, everything you've got in place. So that tension between maintaining an empathic or affinity with the people you work with and also enforcing what's wanted and needed is a paradox. And we've identified quite a few, like more than 14.
I bet. It's an interesting balance, isn't it? And it's something that's not very easily obtained, and probably something, I know I'll even struggle with it at times, because I genuinely want what's best for people, but that what's best for people is like, I have to try to balance, because I've got almost 100 employees in a public company. And at the same time, I want what's best for that person in their own life. Right. So it's like, you don't want to destroy a person by not giving them a chance. You want to help a person, but then you have to say, okay, what's my threshold? What's my time period? So I'm just going to tag on a little bit. There's probably boundaries and certain thresholds you need to have for yourself that you understand, right?
Yeah, there are consequences.
Yeah.
And, to discern the asymmetries in the process, it requires an ability to inquire and to weigh what the prices and rewards are. And I have very specific frameworks to do that.
That's incredible.
And the other thing is to be able to have hard conversations that will deepen the relationship, even if it's going to break apart, that there's a respect and a deepening of the relationship. Yeah. And I think that requires an authenticity that many leaders aren't willing to do. And that's where the leadership comes in, is, like trying to, lying about what you're up to, or trying to make it about the other person when it's really a preference you have.
For sure.
And you can't see exactly how it's good for the other person. Yeah. Like that's when the leadership starts to leak in.
Oh man, we got to plug those holes, brother. For real, Dan. Dude, thank you for being on today. This has been an amazing conversation. We went a little deep, got into some awesome concepts, and I feel like we've only scratched the surface. Everybody, I think you need to go follow Dan at Dan Tocchini, right?
Dan Tocchini.
at Dan_Tocchini on Instagram. And amazing dude. I'm telling you, reverting back to this, I love talking to people like Dan who are to my senior, to my elder, just because of the breadth and wealth of knowledge that guys like Dan right here incorporate into their lives. We can learn something from everybody, and especially look at those who are older than you to be able to look up to them and gain their knowledge and experience, because they paid the dummy tax, right, Dan? So that we don't have to.
Yeah. Dummy tax.
Yeah.
That's good. I paid it. I know it.
You got it. Well, thank you, brother. Thanks for being on today.
Thank you. It was wonderful to be with you. Thanks, man.